This is a tutorial on using the State Leadership Benchmarks of Quality. When you first open up the spreadsheet, you'll see four tabs at the bottom. The first tab is the Instruction tab, then the BOQ Data Entry tab, the Program Summary, and the Graph. The Instruction tab gives you some brief instructions on the data entry. Just lets you know you're entering the team member names, the date, and then your ratings. It also has my name and my email should you have any questions or you run into any issues. And it also has the link to this tutorial. The Data Entry tab is where you'll enter all of your data. The first thing that you'll do is you'll enter your team member names, followed then by the date that the benchmarks were completed, and then each one of your ratings for each one of the benchmarks. You can also type in who if you wish. You have space to enter 6 different benchmark dates. After you've entered your data, then you can go to the Program Summary tab. The Program Summary tab updates as you enter data, so there's nothing that you need to do on this tab. The first thing it shows you is a graph showing you the percent of indicators that are either not in place, which is the red, the blue, which is indicators that are emerging or need improvement, and the green is the percent of indicators in place. So you have this graph and you also have the table. So you can look at it in both ways. Below that, then you have for each one of your benchmark dates, you have these two tables here. The first table gives you the number of indicators not in place for each one of your critical elements. So for State Leadership Team, we see that there are 27 benchmarks that are not in place. For Family Engagement, there's 4 indicators that are not in place. For Implementation and Demonstration Program Sites, there are 4 that are not in place. Professional Development, there are 8. In Evaluation and Database Decision Making, there are 6. And so to the right of that, then you have another table that shows you the number of indicator that is not in place. So the color coding is here to show you it matches the critical elements. So the State Leadership Team, that is benchmarks number 1 through 27. Family Engagement is 28 through 31. Implementation and Demonstration Programs or Sites is that light blue color, so it's number 32 through 35. Professional Development is this peach color, it's number 36 to 43. And then Valuation or Database Decision Making is this yellow color, and it's benchmarks number 44 through 49. So when it tells you that you have 27 that are not in place, you can see over here that it's benchmarks number 1 through 27 that are not in place. So a better example of this is probably the next date, when now there are some benchmarks that are emerging or needing improvement and benchmarks that are in place. And so for State Leadership Team, there's only one benchmark that is not in place. Which benchmark that is, if we look over here at the green area, we'll see that it's benchmark number 27. So now you can go back to your data entry or to your paper form, look at the indicator number here. So we said it was 27, and now we see that this is the benchmark that is not in place. And so the same is true for the others. So Family Engagement, 4 of the benchmarks are not in place, shows you which 4. Implementation and Demonstration Program Sites, we see that there's 1 that is not in place and 3 that are emerging or needing improvement. The one that is not in place is benchmark number 33, and so on and so forth. So then you'll see in the other administration dates you have the same kind of layout. The default view is this one down here. So if you haven't entered data, which we haven't, if we look at the data entry tab, we see that we haven't entered data for the 6th date column. So you'll see, so this here is what it will look like if you do not have any data. So it'll show you, it'll have all of the benchmarks showing, and then it doesn't have anything here or a date here. So you also have graphs. So on the next tab, as long as you entered your team member names in the data entry tab, those will transfer on over here. So the first thing that you'll want to do is to refresh your data. You'll have to click on this chart. You'll see a new tab that appears, Pivot Chart Tools. You'll go to Analyze, and then here it says Refresh. You'll click the down arrow and do Refresh All. This makes sure that all of the data that you entered gets transferred onto these charts, these graphs. So this is a reminder up here to remind you every time you enter data to refresh. You don't have to do that with the other tab, but you do have to do it with this one. So then here it shows you the for each date, it shows you the average rating for that date for that critical element. So you have the 5 critical elements, and then for that date, and those are the bars are the dates, and then the average rating across all of those benchmarks. You also have that in a table. So here is the table. You have the 4 dates that we entered, and then the critical elements, and then it gives you the average rating across those benchmarks. This over here is a filter, and what this allows you to do is to look at 1 or 2 dates at a time, or all of them. So what you would do here is if I only wanted to look at the first date, then I would click on that first date. And then now my table updates as well as my chart. If you wanted to look at 2 different dates, what you can do is you can click on the first one, and then you can hold down the shift key and click on the second one, and that gives you both dates. Or what you can do is you have this multi-select here. You can click on that, and what that lets you do is it lets you pick dates. If you click on it twice, then it unhighlights it and it only shows you those 2 dates or whatever dates that you want. If you want to go back to the original view, which shows you all of the dates, then you can click on this little filter here, and then now it shows you all of the dates. Below that, then we have all of the sub-elements. So then you have your date. Well, below that is a table. Before we get to the sub-elements, below that is a table that shows you kind of the same thing on the program summary tab, how many of the benchmarks are not in place, emerging, or in place. And so that gives you that piece here. Then below that, then we see the sub-elements. So state leadership team has a couple of different sub-elements. It has membership and logistics, action planning, state leadership team coordination and staffing, state leadership team funding, communication and visibility, and then authority, priority, and communication linkages. And so what this shows you here is the average for that sub element. So each one has a certain number of benchmarks in place, and then it gives you that average for that sub element by date. And then you also have it in a table form. So here are all of your sub elements, and then the average across those benchmarks for each date. And here you can do the same thing. You can also filter by certain dates if you'd like to. So if you only want to see one date, you can. If you want to see multiple dates, you can do that too. Again, you can click on this multi-select and then select the dates that you want to see. And then clicking it twice removes that date. You can also use the shift key on your keyboard to select multiple dates. So, and then you can go back to your original view. You may need to move this if you have that 6th date. You may need to move this over a little bit, and so you just hold down your mouse and then you move it over. So the most important thing here is to remember to refresh when you're using these graphs and tables, because these do not automatically refresh on their own, so you'll want to make sure that you do that. If you have any questions or any issues, again, my name and email are on the instruction tab, so you feel free to email me and we can troubleshoot any issues that you're having.